what's up, guys? Welcome to the Lineage Break podcast. I am your host, Cam. With me, as always, is Trusty Steve.
Trusty Steve.
Hi,
Well,
Steve.
isn't it longer now?
Hello.
It's like
Trusty
Tedge
I have a Game of Thrones episode now.
Yeah,
It's,
Breaker of Chains, Mother of
Oh,
Tedgelord T.
all the
Yeah.
epithets.
Yeah. The glue, the trusty one,
Oh,
the Tedgelord
we forgot
T.
about the glue man.
If you're a glue eater, does that make you a cannibal?
I don't want to think about that.
like a horse thing?
Yeah.
Have you eaten? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the glue factory.
So anyways,
This is how lore is
yeah.
Yeah.
We have a couple of special guests today. We have Belle and Roger from Weebs of the Shore. Guys, would you like to introduce yourselves to the audience?
Hello, I'm Belle. I'm the creative lead at Weebs of the Shore.
Hey, Roger, Director of Operations here at Weebs.
Yay!
And we wanted to talk a little bit about the lore today. We're big fans of the lore. We love all the stuff that comes out. And you guys are like, I don't want to say like holistically responsible, but like mainly in charge. But
Guiding
I would
the
say
ship,
so.
you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually don't know, but before I came on board, Roger was the lore person.
Yeah.
And I mean,
They're all
you
like,
guys know,
"Ooh,
but
it
not a
sucked
lot.
back then."
No. I mean, I think obviously it's like he's a lore person, but not just a lore person. He was
Right.
doing like literally everything else and just doing lore in his free time. So now we've kind of like become a bit of like a lore team. So definitely we work together a lot on lore, and we work together to come up with ideas. So yeah, we are definitely the holistically the lore team.
Yeah, it's much more exciting talking and thinking with someone else than being like throwing an idea at the wall and it hitting you back in the head, and you're going like, "Was that good? Was that bad? I can't really tell."
Yeah.
But yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about that. I know, as Belle said, Roger, you had a lot going on. You still have a lot going on. Director of Operations, whatever. It's a big title. But do you find it easier now that you do have Belle, if you guys are working collaboratively?
I would hope so. I hope he says yes.
I mean, we probably wouldn't have this podcast right now if it was yeah,
Tomorrow's
for sure.
my last day, you guys. See you later.
But I can understand. I know a lot of people, myself included, and I won't press too much, but are really interested in some of the older characters and lore, and I know a lot of that was you. Is it hard to sort of like get that information out of your head and give it to Belle so that she can have her own take on it? I know like SB3 just came out, and there's a lot of like cool flavor text and reappearances of some old Cambrian characters, and so I know that that is something that people want. Is that harder to do than new stuff?
Oh, definitely. When you have multiple kind of like authors or directions, there's a lot of respect that happens within the team of like, I want to respect what your vision was at the time, but then that requires a lot more collaboration, a lot more direction, and kind of review back and forth versus like, hey, this is the new direction we're going to go. What is your take? What is like your direction you want to explore? That's much more organic. Like, it's always easier to come up with new ideas and build them out when you own it rather than taking someone else's idea and making sure you treat it with care, respect, and make sure it develops. It's not just myself, but like a lot of the influence from like Silidar, Tin Art Director of like, well, this is where we want this specific champion to go. Or we thought of this character would go here and then eventually develop here. We maybe just, I didn't have time to write back then. And so they've been kind of left on the back burner that will eventually be fleshed out. But whether it passes through my hands, Belle's hands, or maybe like a contract and author's hands, it's a little more challenging rather than here's the fresh character. Show us your take, and then we'll give you feedback and edit that way.
And I think, speaking of fresh characters, I think that's something really important to talk about that we don't really, I think, see people respect enough. That Grand Archive is a new IP, and all of your characters are original, and so it's really hard, I think, to find a way to connect with the audience, especially in a trading card game where the medium is so spread.
It is an awful medium for telling a story. Let's be straight.
So how do you guys sort of, especially in regards to champions, which are always the forefront of sort of player engagement, how do you guys create characters and use sort of a lot of player interpretation to make those like character traits shine through, have people attach themselves to those characters. Like especially the older ones, characters like Lorraine and Sylvie have such a dedicated fan base, but a lot of that is through player interpretation because not everybody's going to sit down and read all the flavor text.
I think that's definitely difficult. That's like the hardest part, right? And I think, to be completely honest, if you were to ask me, with Lorraine and Sylvie, I do think a lot of what people like about them is purely aesthetic.
Sure.
If you were to ask anybody random that was at Worlds, for example, why do you like Lorraine? I don't think anyone's gonna be like, oh, like her personality or her backstory is really cool. Like no one's gonna say like I relate to her. Like no one's gonna say that. They're gonna be like, oh, she's cool. She has a sword, and
She was the first champion I picked up.
yeah,
right?
she's like I like it when she swings her sword, and Crux is cool. You know, like whatever. They're
That's a hot take.
but everyone has like those type of things. They're like Sylvie, oh, she's cute. Slimes, like I like the angst meme. People have like those sort of attachments. I think that was really difficult because I think our challenge was always, okay, well, sure, we can make hot, cute, cool characters and people will always eat those up, right? We can just make a mage cleric for Cam and Cam will, no, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, not to belittle your, but you know what I mean? Like I have my own aesthetic types too, right?
Yeah.
Like you have a character that you just lean towards because the way that they look or the kind of like characteristics they have just like from like the outside. And so we always talk about, well, how can we bring that in more? And like you said, the card game format is really difficult. I mean, card game players historically do not read.
And what is lore but
We're gonna meet
reading?
those allegations.
It's true though, right? Like it's not only it's become like a meme, but it's to a certain degree, it's like, okay, like they're not really gonna sit down and go through the website, look for the lore articles and read those. Like that's we're asking a lot of players. I think if we had like an anime or like a comic, sure, of course people would probably actually engage with those, but it's a lot harder to ask people to sit down and read a big block of text.
Right.
And I do not blame anybody for that at all, right? And there's many games that I've engaged with that have that, and I've never read any of those, even despite me being someone who appreciates lore, right? It's definitely not for everybody. So I think that barrier is really hard. So the most we can do, and what I've definitely tried to do after coming in, is how can I make the flavor text kind of enticing enough to make people confused?
Sure.
My goal is to confuse people.
Sure.
Because the more you
Mission
confuse them, the more they're like, wait, what? Like, wait, I kind of actually want to know more, like what's going on, right? Like if the flavor text is enticing enough, that's cool enough, but has no substance, people want the substance. If the flavor text is very direct, then they get what they understand it right away. So kind of weirdly, that's like the way that you can get people to be a little bit more interested. I have found it, and this is something that we're still struggling with, and maybe we'll get there, I'm sure. But despite doing that, I think there's always going to be people like, I want lore. And you're like, there is lore. Like they'll be like, when are we getting lore on this? And you'll send them the article, and they just won't read it.
Sure.
And that's something that's very difficult to tackle. So that's something we're working on, and I think we have a couple things cooking that we're experimenting and trying to find ways to tell the story better and trying to find avenues to get people more engaged, because I don't want to force everyone to have to read a chapter every time, right?
We do love it though. I'm curious, at least like anecdotally, obviously we like it, but
Right.
whatever.
I was gonna say, force me to read as much as you want. Like I will read it all.
Yeah, of course.
But I always try to look outside of our bubble because we're sycophants or whatever. So, but even within the community, the people that I reached, the reaction has been really positive. Have you found that to be the case for the lore articles that have come out recently? I know that Roger made some a while ago, and the same deal. That was like back in the Kickstarter days, but the reaction was really good. I remember people being really positive about that. Have you been happy with the reaction to the recent lore articles and stuff that you've been putting out?
Yeah, definitely. I think like it's really difficult because I have written I graduated with a degree in writing, and I've been writing, but it actually wasn't my main job for a long time. So I've been in the industry for a really long time, but writing full time, this is like my first time writing full time. I've done a lot of freelance stuff for different things, and I've like published things, but they're all very like just on the side while I have like my real job, and then for fun I write, right? So writing full time for the first time is always scary. lot of imposter syndrome, right? Because writing is art, it can be incredibly subjective, and sometimes you'll write something and you're looking at it for so long, you're like, this is so bad. Like, no one's gonna read this, and if they do, it's gonna suck, and they're gonna be disappointed they waited so long for this. Like, I don't want it to be like this, and I definitely get in my head. But I've been really fortunate that I have like a super supportive team, like especially Roger. Like, he'll read something, he'll be like, "Oh, looks good." I'm like, "Really? Are you sure?" You know. Well, like it's very encouraging. And then I come to something like Worlds and talk to you guys, or during our meet and greet, we've had a bunch of people come up, and it's been super encouraging. And I feel a lot more like every time I get to go to an event, it's so nice because I feel so encouraged and inspired by the community, and seeing people tell me that they actually read it and liked it is like. And that's why I love Lineage Break, right? Every time I make a new article, I'm like, oh, Lineage Break episode this week. I'm so excited. You know, I get really hyped because I know you guys really appreciate it. So for me, it's like, oh, I can get some feedback, and it's always fun to see you guys guessing things too, because you know sometimes guess things I'm like, oh, that's kind of smart. I should have put that in. Like, that's kind of a good idea, you know. And sometimes I'll even farm ideas like from other people's feedback too. So it's like it's been really nice, and I'm sure that if they had anything negative to say, they wouldn't say it to me. So maybe there are people who
You'd be
negative
surprised.
things.
Those people on the internet.
Yeah.
True. But I haven't heard anything too negative so far for anything that I've worked on. So I've been really blessed to have an awesome community and awesome team that really have my back.
You heard it here first. Make sure you send feedback. Feedback is good. People saying that they like the lore. Even constructive feedback is good as well.
Yes.
Constructive
Absolutely.
being the operative word. But what I heard is that I should go on more midnight tirades about the lore, because maybe that'll influence you to put the
for sure.
Please don't read what Cam is saying, because it's all just
Who's that blonde hair, blue dress, not Alice
who could
girl?
it be? It's crazy.
so unbelievably clear.
Oh, the best was I was talking to Steve on like the first day or day 0 or whenever, and I was like standing in a circle with all of like the Lineage Break crew, but you were not there because you were casting, and they were like, yeah, who's that on Fracturize? Who's on the SP3 box? And then someone goes, I thought it was Merlin, but Cam is vehemently denying that it's Merlin. He's saying it's absolutely not Merlin. And
I know Merlin. I've been through FTC season. That's not Merlin.
And then I was standing there like, oh, who could it be? I don't know that.
I know we don't have a confirmation, but of
I
course,
do.
People like us, we read the flavor text.
100%.
The flavor text on Fracturize is your memories aren't all that I'll take, or something to that effect, which is just so ridiculously clear to me. I don't know.
I read that flavor text and I was like, who's on the original Fracturize? Oh, it's Merlin.
But I mean, I think that's a good transition to talk about characters. Not like Merlin. I know that you're obviously newer to the team. That's Roger's fault. That monstrous woman. But do you guys feel like a sort of sense of pride when people do find themselves attached to these characters? I know that in DTR we have obviously Diana returning, but CL is a new character, and Belle, you were very involved in his creation.
Yeah. I'll let Roger talk for all the previous characters, but for sure,
every single one.
Yeah, basically. I've talked about it a little bit, but the first product that I ever really worked on was the Recollection deck. So I had come in right at the end of MRC. So I named one MRC card. That's all I did on MRC.
Sure.
A singular card, just to name, no flavor. And then I did all the naming and flavor for the Recollection decks. So, but those were already existing, right? So I got to, put my hand in there a little bit, but truly the first product I got to work on was AMB. However, because it was so strongly based on Three Kingdoms, I did put a lot of myself in those characters, and I got to build these characters, but they had these sort of very strong labels already attached to them. Like, they have to be this personality. They're already like this kind of character, like in history. They were known to be like doing this, or they had to do this at some point in time. So I do, and someone actually asked me this during my meet and greet, like which character I felt the most like attached to or like personally involved with. It ironically is Kongming. I wrote so much of myself in her, and I really feel like a lot of people can probably, when they read this story, I'm sure they feel a little bit of like, oh, like I could see where she's coming from, or like I've been there. So still, I haven't written that many characters, but up till now, she's definitely the one I resonate with the most. Going into DTR, because I had so much freedom, my priority was, I had a couple priorities. The first priority was I gotta make one for the girlies. I am
Sure.
anyone in
And
Weebs
Steve.
can tell you though. So this is the funny story. Anyone in Weebs can tell you that in the Weebs team, I am probably, if we ranked the Weebs team of who is the weebiest, who is the true weeb of the shore, I think I'd be like number 2.
Oh, yeah.
Number 2.
I would be
one?
number 2. Number 1 is the art director.
Oh, sure. That's
I think
That's fair.
I think Tim cannot be
Yeah.
beat, but I would say that I would probably be actually number 2, and I think people don't realize that about me. But I really like female characters. I don't like male characters. Like at all. like I will if I pull a male character in a gotcha game, I will be sad. I will actually be sad. So it is male characters not for me.
Sure.
But I think being a girl in a game community, it's always hard when I see all the other girlies. Like I just want like a hot guy character, and I think up until now, our male characters, even Tenoris, have been pretty like basic,
Bland. Yeah.
bland.
Yeah.
They're all like just cool guys that do cool things, I guess. Like they don't really have much flavor to them. They don't feel like strong personalities. So with CL, I wanted to make someone with a very, very, very strong personality, very different than what we've had, and I want it to be very obvious.
Very edgy.
Yes. Well, so if I'm gonna make a character with strong personality, they're gonna be edgy. Not something I can really help.
Right.
But I think so with CL, I had a lot more like, I just like went off the rockers with that. I was like, I'm gonna make him like really crazy. I'm gonna make him like have all these things, and then the art team obviously knocked it out of the park. The thing that I was really surprised with during Worlds, absolutely surprised, and I have said it all weekend because I'm so surprised, is I made him for the girlies. Well, all the dudes love him. Look at the number of men I saw wearing a CL shirt.
Oh,
When
God, Warren,
I wore it yesterday.
the number of men I saw wearing a CL shirt,
Yeah.
when he's the only male shirt we
Yeah.
have. You could have worn a Tristan shirt, you could
Yeah.
have worn a Nico shirt, Sylvie shirt, Merlin shirt,
Right.
but people chose to spend their money and buy a CL shirt. Now, I was shocked. That was something very, very, very surprising to me. And honestly, like I felt very happy.
Yeah.
Like really proud. He's like my son.
Sure.
Like, oh, he made it. My son made it.
You need to raise
He's
your son
popular.
better.
He's popular. People like him. So that was really like I felt a lot of gratitude, like just seeing that around, right? Because that's like a way to just instantly see how popular a character is you have 6 shirts to choose from, and you chose the one guy. Like that's awesome.
Yeah, especially in this game too. I hear the story all the time about the reason why the feature match replacement sleeves are Tenoris is because there are so many floating around. Like,
Yeah.
not that we don't love Tony, but like he was obviously not very popular.
Right.
Even 2B with the shirt off, like.
Yeah, and I mean, there's jokes about like the spirits, right? If there's a male spirit, the price is like gonna be a fourth of the
It's
price. And
unfortunately
it's
true. And Kaze is a gorgeous card. But
Yes,
the price
absolutely.
is much lower.
Yeah.
So it is, I think a real testament to the character design that CL is so popular, and hopefully that carries through to DTR launch. Speaking of DTR, did you guys find it, more of a collaborative process? Was it hard to come back to a character like Diana? I know that this has been mentioned, I think officially, on a couple of places, that there was at one point, Roger, there was a light novel that was being written about Azoth, and I know obviously that has all of those characters in it. Was it hard to sort of pull Diana not only like from an older set before Belle joined the team, but also pull it from a section of the game where the lore sort of ended up incomplete because of that light novel falling through?
Well, of course, like we talked about before, like having multiple authors, especially this light novel in progress that kind of tried to define these relationships, but really didn't build it out to our satisfaction,
Right.
and then to scrap it and then move on. I think while it would sound challenging, in my mind, it's just much more fluid because just as humans can like change and evolve and be influenced by so many different events, that's a bunch of different scratches, wears, and tears that characters can develop over time.
Sure.
It's like, oh, Diana's now Astra. Why would that make sense? So a lot of the questions have been like, well, Diana was Umbra before, Diana's Astra now. How do you reconcile it? And it's like, well, to me, it actually makes sense, right? There is a story thread that can be developed, and I think will likely be expanded upon of like, well, Diana being in Azoth, her first mission, being a very like virtuous, very righteous champion, with Umbra being a very ominous and aggressive element. We've been talking with the contract writer of kind of fleshing out that story again and back, but also leading into this world. Her relationship with Umbra, of course, is going to be very tenuous, a very different relationship than CL has with Umbra. I think he
Right.
almost slots into that
Or, like,
type of
embraces it.
emotion much more
Yeah.
better. And so, whether she has kind of a weary experience for the first time, as she goes on to the second mission, you kind of build this wariness with this element where it's like, okay, you know, I'm more experienced now. I've gone through this. Umbra, I'm a little more cautious of, but my friend Arasana in that previous world had a very fantastic development with the Astro element, very matching and fitting. And so it's almost like, why not? Like, she had such a successful endeavor with this very hopeful, very starry-eyed element. What does my character development look like now in this world using the Astro element? How can I try to emulate my friend, my mentor from this previous world? And so that can bring the storyline and the character to life more so. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a culmination, but a building off. Because in some ways, it is still a little naive of her to be like, well, I'm just going to avoid the dark side of myself, right? I just want to turn towards the light side. And so the development, we'll talk more about World of the DTR and Underland itself, is more of like a reflection of like, well, you can't just ignore half of yourself, right? You want to look in the mirror and you confront yourself, confront your fears and the darkness within yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll help develop you as a person or a character overall.
And we do, at least so far, a few weeks out currently as of recording from DTR launch, but we've seen a little bit of that push and pull. We did see at Worlds this weekend, there was an Umber card that was released that does have Diana featured in the art.
Mhm.
So maybe there is, you know, something there, that two sides of yourself like you were talking about. So maybe this one's a little, you know, we'll see if it makes the cut. But I want to talk about. We mentioned earlier the fact that Grand Archive is its own unique IP, which is, I think, extremely challenging in this space. It's so much easier for companies with, you know,
Well, think about it.
mascots or whatever to.
MetaZoo was acquired for $2 million. They thought,
They're doing,
wonderful team,
doing
massive
great.
talent and
Yeah.
backing, that it would be easier to acquire an existing, if failed, IP
Yeah.
rather than start their own.
Right.
That is how challenging the space is towards new IP. If you look at the top games in Japan and you look at all of the new entries, there is no one single original TCG.
Yeah.
The last one being Recross
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Right.
Like, that is how unfriendly the market in Japan is to original IP.
And you guys have been doing, of course, all original characters, but as Belle mentioned in regards to Mortal Ambition and the Sangwa block, a few times you guys have done these sort of like evergreen collaborations, as it were. Like the Three Kingdoms set, of course, we started the game with the Cambrian set, which is, you know, King Arthur themed. And again, now in DTR, we have the Alice in Wonderland themed block. Do you think it is harder to? I sort of myself always separate the Grand Archive champions into like IP agnostic, and then those that have
Inspired,
a sort
like,
of
pull
inspired
from
IP.
origin.
And we're not, you know, maybe a certain character in particular that we mentioned earlier, but do you find it harder to pull, let's say, someone like Kongming, who is in that sort of very, very much based in that Three Kingdoms setting, although she is a Grand Archive champion herself, do you find it harder to like have a set in the future that is cyberpunk themed, and then for some reason you want to bring Kongming, who, you know, in name and in lore is very associated with one particular IP?
I would say that on the surface, it does sound challenging. And of course, this is where the development of the engagement with the character is so important for
Right.
us. It's not just Kongming, but in Grand Archive. We want it to be Grand Archive's Kongming.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
rather than that, it makes much more sense as she's developed as a character, as she then goes to different worlds, goes to the home world, and has her own story develop. It's no longer like, oh, it's that like one reference from that Sango world in like Romance of the Crazy Kingdoms. It's like, oh, they might share the same name, but the story arc and development is so different and so unique to Grand Archive that when we go to this futuristic world in the future, I'm just like, oh, of course Kongming is there, right? She's just sent on a new mission. Now she's like decked out in like cyber gear and
Right.
you know, coding instead. And so like that of course it's a challenge, but that is the goal, in that all of the work and the build up over the next, you know, few years for us is that we have such a unique an engaging character that has already gripped the audience, that they naturally feel that this is just a progression of the game. This is just the progression of the storyline. And I think the IP that does a great job of this is Fate Grand Order. Right?
Yes.
You go through multiple different time periods with multiple different characters. And in some cases, the Fate Grand Order depiction of that character is more popular than their original depiction, right?
Right.
Like you, at this point, you're like Oda Nobunaga. Oh, it's that crazy yandere with a bunch of rifles, right? You're not thinking about some like old daimyo
Feudal
samurai
warlord,
and like
yeah.
the Warring
Right.
Kingdoms period. And so like I think there's just so much wonder and fascination you can pull from the historic reference, some of the themings, like maybe an Alice Wonderland that embodies the theme, embodies the character, but then that we've put our own spin on, and now they have joined into the broader Grand Archive universe.
And do you think that leaves room for, theoretically, I know obviously this is not like official and nothing's on the books or whatever, but do you think that leaves room for the potential of actual collaboration characters, which I know is sort of a very tenuous subject in the TCG realm? You guys have obviously done several collaborations already with VTubers. We have the Nova card coming out very soon, which is really, really cool. And you guys do a great job of fitting those characters from outside of Grand Archive into that Grand Archive feel. You look at the, Fast Cure that has Hoshikawa Sara on it, and it doesn't feel out of place where normally it might if it wasn't treated with such care. Do you think that leaves room for maybe at some point exploring an actual IP character, Artoria Pendragon being a Grand Archive champion?
I think definitely, of course. Like the medium that we've wanted to cultivate has always been more of a patchwork framework.
Yeah.
That it weaves together more like a quilt than maybe like a very sanitary and isolated bubble.
I mean, I think we'd still have a hard time fitting like SpongeBob SquarePants
Right.
as a champ. Like
And
there's like
others do it,
so I think there can be collaborations that could be jarring,
Yeah.
right? Just depends on it. But I think so far the reason why it's been successful is because we've been picking things that resonate well with our target audience and resonate well with the existing. Like Hoshikawa Sara looks good because she's already an anime character, right? She's not like a real person that we've anime-ified or something. So I think that probably gives us a little bit of grace on that front too.
And we're gonna pick projects and clubs that we ourselves are passionate
Yeah.
about, that we want to treat with care and respect, and build into our universe, because we want to continue that relationship and continue to work with them as well.
On that same note, maybe an open-ended question, not in regards to collaboration specifically, because that might be a bit, damning if you guys say something on camera. But are there things that you two, as world-building, gameplay aside, products aside, are there sort of themes or maybe locations or types of characters that you guys want to explore in the future that you haven't?
Oh, I have too many. But Roger, you can go first.
I mean, of course, definitely. I think the set after RDO, the world after RDO is already there. Sunny has always come back and been like, I really want to do this. I really want to do this. And overall, it's not the right time. Like, I don't think we've developed. I don't know if our skill set is there yet. I think this might be too jarring. And now we're at the final time where we're like, okay, we think this is reasonable now. We think by the time that set 10 rolls around, we're experienced enough, our art direction is solid enough that we can really explore this idea that you've been dying to go for. And in some ways, I think some aspects of myself are like, I'm really excited to explore this concept, this theming as well. And so, believe there's so many projects that need to spin out of this to work. There's so much time and effort we need to sink into developing it to make sure it feels right that we go to this world after set 8, 9. And so we're really excited to work on it. We know it's going to be a huge challenge. Like we talked about on stage, the entire year is just challenges and boundaries we want to continue to push. But I think the team is engaged with the idea, and we really want to explore it just from an art, campaign, engagement direction, and from an IP standpoint.
We did a really fun exercise during a team offsite where we went around the room and we asked every single Weebs developer, if you could make any set, what theme would it be? And we actually took a whole list of everyone's kind of wish list of themes. What was yours?
Poro, right?
No.
No, he.
I think it's one of the themes.
I think his got picked
What
actually. Yeah, but Roger, do you remember what yours was?
I think.
Or maybe we can't say because I think yours was wasn't yours also a school the magic? No, maybe that was
No.
Tim's.
Yeah. I think I was more of like I want to do a subset, right? Like
Mm.
eventual, because like a lot of like these, the thematic of Grand Archive is just very heavy. You have to deal with worlds on the edge of destruction. There's always war and battle. It's like the concept that we have has always been like there is a world that is ending, but the rule of ending doesn't need to be necessarily like destruction, right? It can be
Right.
something super silly. And I think it was like, what if we had a world that's in a school, and it's like if this specific character is late to class one more time, the world will end. Like that is just the rule. And so the entire setting is just how do we get her to class on time?
It's very
And
Haruhi.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like because there's just so many like thematics and tropes from a lot of the anime that we enjoy, Monogatari,
Yeah.
Haruhi,
Yes.
Ringo Senpai, that are like it's just fun to play on these tropes and be able to explore that art style that traditionally is just like how would Grand Archive ever get there? It'd probably be
Right.
like a one-off gag set or maybe a subset. I think it'd be just so much fun to try and like figure that out.
Yeah, it's be super fun. I think for me, the team knows because I harp on them a lot. I'm a really big Magical Girl fan, actually. And I was actually telling the Lineage Break boys, I said, don't call Diana Magical Girl. If you call her Magical Girl, Syl's not going to let me have my real Magical Girl
And
set.
I was told I'm banned
You're
from
banned
using
from
it.
ever calling her a Magical Girl. Don't call her a Magical Girl. Because then Syl's going to be like, we already had a Magical Girl, and I'm not going to get a Magical Girl set. so that's one of my big wishes is Magical Girl set. And the other one is I really like mechs. So like a Magical Girl mech set. Like that's like my dream set. But
Saying all the things I like.
but I
Mech.
think but I think the thing that Roger was talking about earlier, if you didn't catch on it, is that the thing that's difficult is if we were to, for example, release a mech set tomorrow, it is extremely jarring with
Right.
everything that we've done so far. It'd be very weird and very sudden. So I think part of our goals are trying to like, how can we, build a world where anything is possible, like a schoolgirl set too, right? Like that's not going to happen tomorrow. Like that would be so jarring. But we want to build a world that feels feasible, that anything could happen, and it doesn't feel jarring, and it
Right.
feels like a natural progression of it. But we're just not there yet.
Of course. Roger, you mentioned something which is open a door that maybe I just want to take a little peek inside. You mentioned a set, of course, after RDO. RDO is something that just got announced this weekend. Very very sneaky. And it was heralded as a capstone set. Of course, we're talking about lore. I don't want to talk about mechanically what that means. I'm sure we'll find out.
You're the wrong
sometime
people
soon.
to ask mechanically. Anyway.
I don't know.
But you described it sort of as this like culmination of the first few years of Grand Archive, and few years of Grand Archive feels crazy to say. But is this sort of going to be a culmination in the sense that it is going to be mechanically, all 7 elements, all 7 classes, or is it sort of a culmination of the storyline thus far as well?
Much more of like think of it like a scrapbooking, whereas
Sure.
like if I were to be an observer and have gone through all of these worlds and seen all of these characters and their storylines, and now after these 4 different worlds, I'm back in the home world and I open up my scrapbook and I
Sure.
try and pick out scenes of like, oh, like this is what happened in Cambria when
cool.
maybe Merlin first interacted with Lorraine, and lets us, as from a story standpoint, kind of like highlight some of these key moments a bit better. And it'll give us time, of course, to then take the time to flesh out potential story beats, whether it is in writing or articles or in flavor, that'll help then not maybe like summate in whole, but continue on those storylines so that they have more of a logical pace into set 9, because
Right.
ultimately there is a common timeline in set 9 and where the champions do return to the homeworlds and let's do more world building of the homeworld itself, some storylines internally, thematics, etc. And so now it's just like we've had the pace, we've kind of caught up ourselves where we were just like justifying the sets, using lore to justify the sets backwards, where now it's like we've gone forward ahead and we can build out what the feeling of the world is, the feeling of the realm, and the story beats of Grand Archive that this set 9 will be able to encapsulate it.
Oh, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in more home world lore, just because it's like one of the bits of the story that we don't have a lot on.
Yep.
Right.
Like I think the Proxia's story was so like eye-opening for things. I was like, oh my god, I just need more of this. Like I want more interaction between the gods that we know.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think it was really cool to see a sort of peek into it in the AMB draft pack. We got some cool like homeworld themed cards, which a lot of people missed. You can go find them on Index. They're very cool. And yeah, of course, Regaling Regalia, I think, is also my favorite piece of lore that we've gotten so far, just because it's really cool to see that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people
into
totally
the whole world.
missed the.
Scylladar's here.
I think a lot of people totally actually missed the draft pack stuff.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot of stuff in there. If you go through and read all the flavor and read all the titles of the cards, even we put a lot of things in there that hint to a lot of things as well. So we're excited to kind of expand more on that in other places, right?
I know that I have a long layover coming up, so I think I'm gonna have to do some rereading of some cards.
I'd like to think of it in like 3 spheres, and that the giant outer sphere is actually the lore we need to build internally for us to be able to connect the pieces of like the story in whole. Like we as writers and world builders need to understand, all right, what is the Grand Archive? How does it work? How do we then build out the storyline from there? What are the big crisis points? What are the big interactions? That we do have like fairly fleshed out understanding. Of course, a lot of that, most of that, maybe 99% of it isn't even bled out to the public.
Right.
And then the inner sphere is then like, what is the flavor from that we need to have the champions embody? That when they are presented as far as their art goes, their flavor, their effects, that it feels holistic. That it's like, oh, that's such a CL thing to be. Like, oh, the art, he's so like, he's kind of like wishy-washy. He's like two-faced. He's very like emotional in one art. He's very sad in another art. And then that's reflected in the flavor. That's reflected in the naming of the card. So it doesn't feel out of place between all of that. And so that's more subconscious for the audience to be able to be like, oh, that is so CL. Then they can't really explain why it is CL or why that is Diana. That's just the feeling that they have. And then this more like crunchy middle or last circle is like all the actual extensive lore that's written out, all the story beats that if someone does want to go into it and find out exactly what happens stanza by stanza, they can. So in my mind, that's kind of like 3 circles of lore that we have to develop out that isn't really like seen from the outside, but that's how it's presented for the layers of people that want to engage with the story in spaces.
And do you find that those sort of circles, as you said, become sort of different sizes depending on the product? You said, of course, you know, the biggest one being aligning the story internally. Belle said something to me, which hopefully I can say on camera, that the storyline for DTR is one of the most complex that she's ever written, and that it was really hard internally to get everything straight because the storyline is so complex. Do you find it's going to be a lot harder to express that in, as Roger said earlier, a terrible medium for storytelling in trading card games? Do you think it'll require more of one part than the other?
Definitely so. I think it's like it works on that outer layer of like, well, DTR can be a story, but from even an overarching grand archive progression, it needs to build towards something, right? Merlin is coming back. Why? Does that mean that the Camarilla storyline is continuing from there? Why is she coming back? How does that relate to potentially Azoth? How does that relate to potentially AMB? We may not talk about that for a few years, but internally we need to be able to justify how that builds and progresses into an eventual apex, culmination, and climax for the story beats. And so there's a lot of time being like, okay, if we need to know where we're going, we need to know where we come from.
Right.
And so then it's like, where does a lot of the origination, world building develop? And then that needs to be fleshed out in order for us to eventually culminate into, you know, where the story beats go from this specific like incident point. Why is she in this specific world? Why do we have these champions going to the world? What is the result of this? And how will that pay off not only for the characters in the world, but for the reader and the player experiencing it from the other side?
I think it kind of goes back to what you were asking earlier about like going back to old champions. And some of the older champions, it is really difficult to go back because nobody has written those beats out. And so when I'm asked to write something new now for these champions, like, well, now I got to make up a reason why they're here or what happened before. To a certain degree, it can be kind of arbitrary, and now it's like, oh, well, I'll think about it when it's actually important, and then I'll just kind of go forward, and then we'll start working backwards. But that's always obviously going to be a difficult process, and right now we're trying to really future-proof that so that we don't have that happen. So we've been working internally, like, for example, we have like a whole Bible like a lore Bible where it has all the chapters, it has every like story beat, it has all the character information, but it's not like we could just release like a bullet list to the public
Please
and
do.
tell you and tell you everything that's gonna happen. Well, that'd be no fun, right? So then it's like, okay, well now we have all these bullet points. Like, how do we get this in an interesting way out to the players? And sometimes that means that we have all these little flavor tidbits that are alluding to something, but you're not going to find out for like 5 years, like what that actually, any of that means, you know? But hopefully the payoff 5 years later is like, oh my God, like they were setting up for this whole time. Like, that's crazy, you know? That's like kind of like those things that we're hoping to achieve. Is he okay?
What the?
What?
Sil, you all right?
Are you
All
okay?
right. He's doing great.
Scared me.
Sil's doing a performance. By the way. Yeah, I think something that I find really cool as people that do really dig into as much of the lore as we can is those sort of rewards, like you said, for people that pay attention and again, mentioning Regaling Regalia, which we haven't talked about on camera, there was a lot in that article for the people that read it.
Yeah.
Like, if you guys aren't reading the lore or looking at the flavor text, like there is a lot that can be revealed. I'm in this situation where I'm somewhat close to you guys, and so sometimes I see things that maybe I shouldn't. And so anytime I make some sort of prediction and people are like, oh, they must have told you, it's just because I pay attention.
Right.
And I hope that, there's more of that, of course, like Fracturized now confirmed, thanks Roger, I'm sure that's the most obvious thing of all time, but does, lend that sort of people that pay attention can be like, oh, this, makes sense that this character is here. Is there stuff that's currently out, guys, that we're missing that maybe we should pay attention to? You don't have to name it specifically, just send people on a goose chase.
I mean, this isn't a goose chase, but something that I thought was surprising that people haven't really put together, and Roger just mentioned, and I think you were even a little surprised, is that Merlin is on Through the Looking Glass, or the Looking Glass.
Right.
And what does that mean?
Right.
That means she's in Wonderland. And I think that's like a crazy implication, right?
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean, right? Where do we go from there?
Right.
And I think it's like such a small thing, but such an obvious thing once you know, that I don't think anyone has even really talked about or thought about.
It's
yet.
crazy that people haven't mentioned it.
Exactly.
At all.
Yeah.
The fact that the Divine Relic was showed at Worlds, which is so atypical.
Yes.
The fact that it had, I think, very clearly Merlin in the art, and like I didn't hear any, gasps in the audience.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Everyone's just like
It's
Omnistrad.
just, like,
Ooh.
people are like,
Yeah.
look at this card text, but like that's, a couple of times, like when I first played the DTR starter decks, I think it was Sil or somebody else yelled at me because I was spending too much time looking at the art in the first deck instead of reading the card. So yeah, people pay attention. What were you gonna say, Steve?
I was gonna say, I've been talking about Merlin.
Yeah.
Hushed lips, obviously, because I don't want to ruin it for everyone.
Right.
But with one of the Lineage break guys, we were rooming together, and every time we would get back to the room, we'd be like, all right, so this is what I've gleaned now from all of what I've been looking at through all these spoilers, and I think it's super cool that like you're like dropping the breadcrumbs for us to follow.
Right.
Yeah, I'm super excited for Wonderland. I am, so happy that you're on the team, Belle. But personally, Three Kingdoms was not something that I grew up with, and it's hard for me to like connect with that story.
It wasn't something, to be honest, it wasn't something I grew up with either.
Sure.
So I actually, when I was told that I had to do this, I bunkered for a month and I just consumed every possible Three Kingdoms related media, video, breakdown. I mean, there was
Lots
no
of
way I was going to
Dynasty
read the
Warriors.
entire text,
Lots
right?
of Dynasty Warriors.
Yeah, I watched multiple playthroughs of Dynasty Wars. I did actually do that, and because that's a really good reference, right?
Yeah,
it's a
of course.
characterized version
Right.
of what it is, and they're actually very good about. I think I went down the Reddit rabbit holes of like which Dynasty Wars is most historically accurate, and like looking for those, like, oh, this one is wrong on this front or right on this front, and trying to channel those things and learn. But Alice in Wonderland is something that it's actually, I'm really excited because I really love this franchise. Like, I think it's not a franchise, but like
IP,
public domain work.
Sure,
But even in high school, we were made to memorize like some of the poems, like part of our high school curriculum. And I had always just thought it was like so silly and like fun. So it was really exciting to be able to kind of work on a IP that I really cared about this
Yeah.
time. So hopefully, yeah, you guys are excited. But I gave Steve homework.
I was given homework. I have to read Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass.
Wow, that's a lot.
Because
Wow.
I was told that once I do, Underland might make more sense.
It's just such a there's so much happening in Wonderland. It's a very complicated storyline. So I think if you at least have the baseline of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, it'll help you navigate it a little bit more.
Sure.
But it is very difficult.
And as you said, the freedom that you have is I think really the best part, that we can sort of see much more of your creative work shine through, where you're not chained to, as you said, this character has to be characterized this way.
Right.
Allows a lot more freedom. So.
Yeah, no, and I'm really grateful to the team for trusting me. And this was also the first set that I got to write descriptions for card art.
Sure.
So
awesome.
up until now, basically, I would kind of get art, and we would have to be okay, what scene does this work in? For the text, okay, maybe it kind of works with this and this vibe. And a lot of times we got very lucky, and it just worked really well, or we were able to retcon things to make them fit. I think Azoth also had a lot of scene arts kind of already baked in.
Yeah, so
because of
what
the
would
light
always
novel
happen
production.
before Bell joined, and just based off the production timeline, you'd always just put art into queue. 'Cause we didn't really know, or art was always going to take the longest, design and naming and everything come after. I would get 200 art pieces, 200 card files, and I'm like, okay, I just need to name it. I'll make it. I'll make sure it fits, and then my head canon would go oh, this is a unique character. This is a unique character. Maybe they interact like this. Maybe this card represents that. I'll put a sneak line here. So it's something like Savage Slash and Sudden Steel
Yeah,
are two flips of the same coin. So if you follow the flavor, it's her first strike and her last strike, because I was oh, Savage Slash is something you play early. It's your 2 cost. Floating Memory, Sudden Steel is when you've leveled up, you're level 3 and you're finishing the game. So it's I'll put in a little interesting duality there. And so that's where I found kind of the pieces of creativity and joy. It was less so of I can construct a whole storyline of well, this is just what it's gonna be like. This is the scenes we're gonna lay. These are the domains. Of course, there's gonna be a Camelot. Of course, I guess I'll make up some fiery place. Oh, I guess Rai starts there, and that's where a lot of the flavors of oh, if Rai starts there, Creative Shock, he plays that. That'll reference that. And then, maybe Rai meets some cultists. Okay, I guess they have a cult now. And so then I was I'm getting a lot of ice cards, and I was okay, I need to make a religion for a lot of this, because they seem to be a lot of mage cards. And even Lunette came up like that. Yeah. Lunette was originally just a generic ally, and we were wait, this piece is way too good. Yeah. We're just gonna upshift her into a unique character. And then I started thinking, okay, based off of the art, based on the depiction, what is her personality? What does she look like? Oh, what are interesting aspects of that? That came Staff of Lumina when we eventually reprinted that, Proxia. Then it came into the Regalia, where I was oh, what is the story of Proxia's Vault? What is the story of Sarah in Cambria? It was we had all these pieces, and then the creative interest was in justifying why they all fit together. And then that could justify the world, and then build out unique character moments from that point on. But as we caught up on time, of course, the goal always is to be creatively holistic altogether. As much as that is fun and works within the constructed time frame, it's not ideal. And so once we got past A and B, it was more okay, what is the story beats we're trying to start with? We know the elements, we know the classes of Underland. What is then the holistic story we're trying to tell from there? And then we can pass on instruction to art, to design, to make the world itself feel inclusive altogether.
Yeah, so I think that you'll find that DTR, even just going through the starter deck, you'll already find that there's a lot more connection between the art, flavor, and overall story. And I think it'll be really exciting to see you guys talk about it.
Yeah, I said something a long time ago when we first got the stuff, the leaks for CL and Diana.
Leaks.
Or not leaks, but the spoilers.
Spoilers,
The silhouettes that we had.
Yeah, of course.
And the CL one mentions that he's trying to protect someone, and then I got the starter decks this weekend, and on the flavor text, it was Alice, so he does have.
Wow, what a layup!
He does have a. He does have a maiden to protect.
Steven, I It's my goat right here. I had no idea how I would force this into the conversation.
Whoa, segue!
I could see it behind his
Look at
eyes.
that
He was just
guy.
like trying to figure it out, and I got him.
I do, so I don't want to keep you guys too long. We have a flight to catch, and I could talk your ears off forever, but I won't
Next
do that.
Worlds.
Next Worlds.
We'll finally talk about
be there, I'll
the
see.
8. No.
I have 2 questions. First of all, for Bell specifically, did you choose to make all of the card titles in the starter decks purposefully French so Sil could not pronounce them?
Just so Sil could not pronounce them. No, I think I was actually, I don't know why I did it, because to be honest, there were so many people struggling with A and B that I was
Watch
struggling
this.
with.
I was just like,
struggling
what do you
with
mean? All
A&B.
these names perfectly fine.
But I thought with like CL, it had to.
Yeah.
It just had like
Yeah.
I had no choice on that.
No
He's
choice.
he's so edgy.
There was only one option.
Umbra, like you look at the
His name is
cards.
CL.
His name's CL. Like everything about it, just it had to be French. And actually, it was a lot of fun doing that. I don't know French, so I'm sorry to any French people I may offend with any of the card names. But I thought that having that flavor, everything just felt a little fancier, a little more pinky up. Like you play your card with pinky up. Everything felt just a little more fancy, a little more like dark and mysterious. And that was exactly the vibe I was going for. I think sometimes it can be difficult with card names. And Roger and I talk about this a lot because we can do like flame something swordsman like 100 times, right? And that's always going to be, well, what's going to be easy for people to remember? What's going to be easier for people to like, you know, connect directly with? But I thought that this was probably our one good opportunity to have like an excuse to use, you know, and a lot of the French words we use in English, so it's a little bit easier. You know, they feel a little bit more natural.
Yeah, nocturne, that's a French word.
Yeah, sinister, you know.
Chevalier.
Yeah, chevalier, you know. but yeah, so that was kind of like the inspiration behind it, and you may have seen from the World's presentations that we also have some German. So the idea was that the nations kind of are different countries, and so we have Lucenia, that's a little bit more on the German side, and then we have the country parts, which is a little bit more on the French side. So you know, that kind of was like a fun play for that as well.
I think the flavor is super cool, but I've also never been happier to be taking a backseat from casting, so I don't have to learn how to say all these words in French.
Yeah, it's like Bill said, sometimes it's like you find where you have fun creatively. I think back in A and B, some of like the sets that I named were around like the Fate Stones, where I was like, oh, like Break the Past. And I was like, oh, what if I made them all like 3-word names? So that flow kind of like makes it a little more like spellcasty. It gives a little more story beats, and it kind of like stands apart, even if you don't explicitly see that pattern.
Right.
As you say the names, the decks itself will feel more unique. And the same concept went with a lot of like the Kongming specific cards. It was like, you know, Bagua of like Cardinal Fate, or what was the Stratagem of Myriad Ice. It was like, what are these like more like tactical spellcrafter type of names that would fit in a more like Kongming deck that feels unique to that we wouldn't use anywhere else.
Yeah.
I will say that there is a unique problem that we have when naming cards that I think people don't really think about, is that if we name them a specific way, it basically prevents them from being reprinted. So if it has a very certain flavor to them, we can't ever reprint it in another set, right? Like Bagua of Cardinal Fate, like that's not going to be reprinted in Cambria, for example, right? It cannot be. But that's fine, because that has like a Kongming, very specifically Kongming effect. So we have to pay attention to those things as well. So it's like, okay, what is like specific to this character? And if it is specific to this character, then we can be a little bit more creative and fun and silly with it. But a lot of the other ones are going to have to be generic just by nature, so that we can have them in other sets and they can like be evergreen.
Yeah, do you find that sort of lines up a little bit more with advanced elements? Because at least that's my sort of interpretation, is that I feel like the advanced element cards are usually more uniquely named because they are, I would say, typically less needed for reprints without that character's association.
I think actually not really. I would say that the starter decks are probably the ones that feel the most contained in that sense. I would say that the advanced elements have to feel incredibly specific to the element thematic.
Sure.
more than anything else. Because, for example, if we had Astrocyte before and then we reprint another Astro Champion and, we had named it something like Arisana Sight, like,
Sure, yeah.
it's not going to work, right?
Right,
We'd have to reprint a whole new card. So something like that we do have to be mindful of. And just because, Diana is the current only user of the Ether Wing, who knows? Maybe in the future there may be another Ether Wing champion, right? So we don't want to limit ourselves to those things.
All right. Well, I have just one last question, and Roger's been dodging me for weeks. On or off camera, if you want me to shut off the camera, I'll do it. That's the end of the episode. We'll see you guys later. Tell me about Alice, Roger.
So Alice is Ciel's master.
She's blonde.
Yeah.
She's blonde. She's cute.
She's got this like key staff thingy.
Yeah.
She's a cleric.
Exalted.
All of her cards are cleric.
Is she a cleric?
All of her cards, every single card she's on is a cleric subtype. Every single one.
Crown is chasing her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's the golden queen, I think.
Trying to
Yeah,
shirk
you think?
responsibility.
Yeah.
Running away from
She's
home.
running away from home. Yeah.
Well, you tell me about Alice.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
What do you want Alice to be?
I went
Yeah.
on a little bit of a tirade on Twitter, and I know that you both read it. I appreciate you reading my stupid tweets. But this is something that, again, I mentioned I think is so cool about the way that you guys express the story is, again, I really don't know anything. But I read the blurb that we got on the product sheet, which gives us a lot of background about the world of Wonderland. And then we got a couple of pieces of art that had this character in it and a couple of pieces of flavor text, and that allows you to piece together, I think, convincingly a lot of information, which sort of leads us to believe that Alice is the Golden Queen that has gone missing, but not like kidnapped, has sort of left of her own volition because she's running away from responsibility, as Roger said, has this sort of refusal to rule is what it feels like. I don't know about her mechanically. Like, obviously, you guys aren't mechanics. I hope she's a champion. All I'm going to say, we recorded a show here at Worlds, and I think I messed up the audio, so you probably won't hear me go on this tirade. So I'm doing it again now. But the way that you guys present characters in official media, I think, is really important. And when Mortal Ambition came out, there's a really cool trailer. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Maybe they've played it once or twice.
I'm waiting. It's my favorite song of all time.
But in that Mortal Ambition trailer, which came out with AMB, at the start of the trailer, before the title card, we get Kongming and we get
Jin.
Jin. And then we get Lubu. And at the time, we were like, oh, well, surely in the next set, Lubu's going to be a champion, or at least extremely important to the plot.
She is.
She is, of course. No, I agree. And I think she is. And she got the C-Wire, she got the double-sided flip card, the level 4 champion, all very integral parts of that sort of block of sets. And then the DTR trailer came out this weekend, and you see our two new champions, Diana, you see CL, and then we see Alice in a full body shot.
Who we assume is
champion
Alice?
card.
Oh yeah, who we assume is Alice.
And
right?
then on the title card, it shows the two queens that we've already seen their names. We saw their art this weekend, and in the middle is Alice. I don't know. I mean, I do know. Like, that seems very, very cut and dry to me. I don't know. Whatever. You guys aren't giving me anything.
I mean, I think they just did a little bit.
Yeah.
You ignored it because you don't want to believe it.
What?
They said who you believe is Alice.
100%. I swear to God.
I'm just saying, you might not want it.
Just
but
don't let Merlin do anything.
She's taken. Yeah, I was gonna say she's taken someone over before.
That's why I quit. You guys will never see me again. All right, I think that's all I have for you guys. Is there any closing thoughts, Steve? You guys that you want to?
I think I just want to say thank you both for creating such a beautiful world with Wonderland and all of the other worlds that have made this game feel so alive.
And thank you both for appreciating lore. It's always every Friday I look forward to Lineage Break. I'm always watching. I watch every episode. I haven't missed a single one. So
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so much of it is like we want to put so much of ourselves, our hearts
Mm.
and souls into building characters and worlds that we think are compelling, that we think we would want to read, and we
Mm-hmm.
hope that you guys and everyone else part of the Grand Archive community
Right.
can also resonate with. And it's just so rewarding for people then to come up to us and tell us, "Oh, I just read that latest article. I thought that
Right.
was really cool." How you
Yeah.
guys talk about Regalia and Regalia so much makes me feel really happy because
Yeah.
that came out of like a fever dream.
That
and I
was-
like,
that was
Belle,
crazy.
I'm
He was-
writing this article. I need you to fill in.
Out of nowhere, he was like, I was struck with inspiration. I just wrote, like, I got taken over and I wrote this thing. And he was like, can you finish it? And so I was like, yeah. And I read it and I was like, this is really good. And I just did the dialogue for it and I spruced it up a little bit. And then we just released it. And it was really awesome.
Yeah, and I think to date, it's probably my favorite
Yeah,
article.
I think. For
Yeah.
Sure. And I think, again, something that I want to be very clear to the audience, feedback is so important.
Yes.
And I think there are way more people out there that enjoy, maybe not even specifically this piece of lore or this world or whatever, but parts of it they're so passionate about. And I feel like a lot of that goes unsaid. They enjoy the lore or their character, or they love the way that they've been characterized or whatever, and they just keep that to themselves. And so you shouldn't go on the internet, Twitter, whatever, and tell these guys how great a job they do. One more thing, absolute last thing before we're done. When lore?
Hopefully next week.
Maybe.
Well, by the time this podcast
Yeah.
goes up, it's probably up.
Well, that'll be like years.
So then it
from
looks
now,
like you're
so-
looking greedy. Like you just got your lore.
I
report.
am.
Like,
Oh,
asking
true.
again.
Oh, that'd be
I
so
am
funny.
greedy.
It's like we put this episode up, next day lore.
Cool. Okay, thank you guys so much for taking a seat with us and talking about some lore. Thank you guys for watching. Of course, if you want to catch the show, you can catch us live every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time,
Asterisk.
or you can catch the VOD of the last week's show on Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Asterisk.
And we will see you next week.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Bye-bye. Yay.